They didn't just slap a fake violation notice on my lobster traps. They tried to sink my entire livelihood with a forged environmental decree that smelled fishier than a week-old bait bucket. Picture this: dawn breaking over the rocky Maine coast, that salty fog rolling in like a ghost, the creak of my old wooden dock under my boots as I load traps onto the salty dawn. Gulls screeching overhead, the distant clang of buoys bobbing in the harbor. And then, out of nowhere, a siren wails Coast Guard cutter pulling up, lights flashing like it's a drug bust. All because some entitled newcomer decided my family's century-old dock was destroying the ecosystem? What would you do if a total stranger showed up in your town, waved around phony papers, and tried to bully you off your own land? Drop a comment below with your worst fake authority nightmare. I've got stories, but I bet yours are wilder. My name's Elias Thorne, call me Eli. I'm 52, born and raised in Harbor's Edge, a speck of a village on the Maine coast where the Atlantic chews at the cliffs like it's always hungry. Population 1,200 if you count the summer tourists who clog the lobster shacks with their out-of-state plates. I inherited the Thorne dock from my grandfather, Silas, who built it in 1923 with his bare hands and a stubborn streak wider than Penobscot Bay. Silas was a lobsterman like his father before him, tough as barnacles, with calluses that could sand wood. He taught me to read tide charts before I could read books, the smell of diesel and brine baked into my skin from summers hauling traps at his side. The sea gives, Eli, but she takes too, he'd say, his voice gravelly from salt air and cheap cigars. When he passed in 2018, I quit my side gig as a mechanic in Bangor and came home full-time. The dock's not just wood and pilings, it's my business, Thorne Seafood Co-op, supplying fresh lobster to half the restaurants from Portland to Bar Harbor. Without it, I'm sunk literally. No dock means no boat access, no traps, no income. And in a town like this, where winters hit like a nor'easter, you don't mess with a man's way of life. That's when Beatrice Hargrove blew in like a bad squall. BEA, she called herself, 58, with that polished look of someone who'd never gutted a fish in her life. Moved here from Boston in spring 2024, bought the old Victorian on Cliffside Road for cash. Rumor was she cashed out big from some tech divorce. Short bob haircut, always in khaki vests and those expensive hiking boots that screamed "I'm here to save the planet." But her eyes sharp as a gutting knife, always calculating. She started the Harbor's Edge Coastal Preservation Society HECPS. She loved acronyms right after arriving, claiming it was a non-profit to protect our fragile marine ecosystem from overfishing and pollution. Sounded noble at first. Town hall meetings with glossy flyers, petitions for sustainable practices. But it was all smoke. BEA appointed herself president, collected donations at every event, and started throwing her weight around like she owned the bay. Her target: me and my dock. Said it was eroding the shoreline, harming endangered puffins or some nonsense. Never mind that the dock had stood through hurricanes and ice storms for a century without a peep from actual environmental agencies. The confrontation hit that May morning in 2024. I'd just finished baiting traps, herring stench clinging to my gloves, when the Coast Guard showed up. 2 officers, young guys looking uncomfortable, handed me a cease and desist order from HECPS. "Sir, we've got a report of illegal dredging and habitat destruction," one said, reading from a clipboard. The paper looked official: seals, letterhead, citations to state wildlife codes. BEA stood on the shore, arms crossed, smirking like she'd caught me red-handed. "Mr. Thorne, your operations are in violation of the Coastal Wetlands Protection Act," she called out, her voice carrying over the waves like a foghorn. "We've documented erosion patterns directly linked to your pilings." shut it down, or face fines up to 50,000. I laughed at first, had to be a joke. But the officers weren't smiling. Turns out BEA had called in a tip with photos she'd doctored, showing damage that was just natural tide wear. What would you do? I told the guards to check with the real authorities, but the seed was planted. That day cost me 4 hours of lost fishing time, and whispers started rippling through town like high tide. BEA didn't stop there. Over the next months, her harassment ramped up like a building storm. June, anonymous complaints to the Department of Marine Resources, claiming my traps were poaching in protected zones. Inspectors showed up unannounced, poking through my gear while BEA watched from her SUV, sipping a latte. They found nothing, but the stress gnawed at me, nights staring at the ceiling, listening to waves crash against the rocks, wondering if I'd lose it all. July, she rallied a community petition at the summer fair, cotton candy smells mixing with fried clams, her booth decked in banners screaming "Save our shores from greedy fishermen." Got 150 signatures, mostly tourists who didn't know better, and presented it to the town select board. Elias Thorne's dock is a blight, she declared in that boardroom, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the scent of old coffee stale in the air. The bored old-timers like me rolled their eyes, but she filed for an injunction anyway, tying me up in paperwork. My lawyer, old buddy Harlan from high school, charged $200 an hour just to sort it. August, things got personal. Vandalism, my boat lines cut, traps smashed on the dock. No proof it was her, but I caught her white Lexus creeping by at midnight, headlights off, the crunch of gravel giving her away. Then the social media blitz, HEP's Facebook page blasting me as an eco-criminal, photos of polluted waters that were just muddy after a rain. Town split, some old salts backed me, but newcomers, lured by B's green charm, started giving me the cold shoulder at the diner. Eli, maybe tone it down, my neighbor Clara said over pie, her voice hesitant. It hurt. This wasn't just business, it was my grandfather's legacy, the salt-crusted ropes he'd tied, the stories etched into every plank. I fought back with what I knew, facts and grit. Years as a mechanic taught me to diagnose problems methodically, trace the leak, fix the source. I started documenting everything. Trail cams on the dock caught shadows but no faces. Pulled public records on HEPS, turns out it wasn't registered as a nonprofit anywhere. Odd, but not damning. Harlan helped file countersuits for harassment, but B's pockets ran deep. She hired a slick Portland firm that buried us in motions. Irony, she preached sustainability but drove a gas guzzler and lived in a house with a heated pool. Tension built. September brought nor'easters, wind howling like banshees, rain lashing the windows. BEA escalated, fake fines mailed to my door, 10,000 penalties for violations, complete with phony state seals. I ignored them, but they scared my sister, Lena, who ran the co-op's books. Eli, what if she's right, she asked, her voice trembling over the phone. No, I thought, smelling the storm air thick with ozone, this Karen was bluffing, but why? Motivation clicked during a late-night dig. BEA wasn't saving the planet, she was a real estate shark. Whispers from a Portland contact, her ex-husband's firm specialized in coastal flips. Buy low, develop high. Harbor's Edge was prime for eco-resorts. My dock sat on the last undeveloped waterfront parcel. If she drove me out, she'd scoop it cheap. The turning point came in October, leaves turning fiery red against the gray sea, the chill biting like teeth. I dove into research, coffee going cold at my kitchen table, the tick of the grandfather clock marking hours. Harlan pulled strings for IRS records. HEPS had collected $45,000 in donations but filed number 501 C3 forms. Fraud. But deeper, I hired a ex-cop named Rita, who tailed BEA. Found her meeting shady types at a Bangor motel, handing envelopes. Turns out, her society was a shell, forged documents from an online template mill, embezzling funds for personal use. The kill shot: Rita uncovered emails, BEA bribing a county clerk for fake environmental reports, planning to force sales from 3 other locals, including me, then flipped to a developer for millions. Excitement built like a rising tide I shared with allies. Clara, regretting her doubt, dug through town archives. Found B's property deed had irregularities backdated to dodge taxes. Harlan validated, this is gold, Eli. Wire fraud, forgery, racketeering. We built a dossier thick as a phone book, allies rallying, lobstermen, shop owners, even some newcomers seeing through her facade. The climax hit at the November town meeting, community hall packed, wood stove crackling against the cold, smells of wet wool and popcorn from the snack table. BEA, overconfident in her power suit, proposed a mandatory eco-audit that would have shuttered my dock. For the puffins, she crowed, projector showing her doctored slides. The crowd murmured approval at first. Then I stood, heart pounding like a diesel engine, dossier in hand. B's HEPS is a scam, I said, voice steady. Projected evidence, forged seals, bank statements showing funds funneled to her account, $32,000 on luxury trips, emails plotting land grabs. Gasps rippled. Rita testified next, photos of bribes. Harlan laid out the law, this is federal fraud. B's face crumpled, tried to bluster, lies. Defamation. But the sheriff, tipped off, cuffed her mid-rant. You're under arrest for forgery and embezzlement. Chaos, cameras flashing, crowd cheering, BEA screeching as they led her out, her boots slipping on the polished floor. Ironic, her fake authority crumbled in the very hall she'd manipulated. Resolution came swift as a tide change. BEA faced